Your Royal Highness, Prince El-Hassan bin Talal, founding patron of the Islamic World Academy of Sciences, Your Excellency Professor Adnan Badran, Your Excellency Professor Muhammad Iqbal Chaudhry, Fellows of the IAS, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu wa ba'd. It gives me great pleasure and indeed honor to welcome you at the occasion of this biodiversity conference. We are indebted to the vision of His Royal Highness Prince El-Hassan bin Talal, the patron of our academy, who was behind the idea of convening this conference in cooperation with COMSTECH. Without his guidance and inspiration, we wouldn't be meeting today. I do not need to remind you of the risk we are running with our continued ignorance of the importance of biodiversity as the vehicle to guarantee sufficient supply of food and water. Our unsustainable agriculture not only consumes about 70% of available water, but it causes pollution and contaminates our food and water supply and pushed 40% of insect species to the verge of extinction. These insects are our agents performing the tedious job of pollinating our crop for feed. Biodiversity deterioration can result in soil degradation and eventual desertification, jeopardizing stability of societies that may eventually lead to loss of their bioculture and valuable traditional knowledge which has been developed over millennia. COVID-19 is only one example of zoonotic pathogen that had erupted in 2019. Similar pathogens may do the same at any time, given the current level of infringements into the environment. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed our fragility, our connectiveness, and at the same time, our resolve to take actions at individual, society, and governmental levels. Similar realization and resolve ought to be observed with regard to climate change, which contributes to biodiversity loss and seem to cause damage and mortality rate far more than COVID-19. Our meeting today comes just in time before the convening of the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15 conference, which will be held in China. The said conference will discuss topics that outline post-2020 framework in a bid to curb global biodiversity deterioration. Our conference is therefore intended to raise awareness of these topics and negotiations that are expected to take place in COP15 sessions. Lastly, I would like to thank the staff of both institutions, COMSTECH and IAS, who worked diligently to realize this event. Thank you. Now we give the microphone to Dr. Muhammad Iqbal Chaudhry. Dr. Chaudhry is the Coordinator General of OIS Standing Committee on Scientific and Technological Cooperation, COMSTECH. He is a distinguished national meritorious professor and director at the International Center for Chemical and Biological Sciences. Dr. Chaudhry, please.
You are muted, Iqbal Bhai.
Dr. Chaudhry.
Microphone.
Is okay. Thank you. Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. His Royal Highness Prince El-Hassan bin Talal, founding patron of IAS. Delighted to see you, sir. You are a great vision for us, and we've been absolutely appreciative of your leadership. Director General, dear brother, Professor Dr. Abdullah Al-Musa, Excellency Professor Dr. Adnan Badran, Fellows of the Islamic Academy of Sciences, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I begin by welcoming His Royal Highness Prince Talal for gracing the occasion as the chief guest. On behalf of COMSTECH, the Ministerial Standing Committee for Science and Technology Cooperation for OIC countries, I'm also pleased to welcome all the distinguished speakers and delegates of this very important event on biodiversity. This event is focused on bringing various stakeholders, international and within the OIC region, on board in the on unified view at the International CBD Biodiversity Conference, which is supposed to be held in November 2021 in Kunming, China. The conference is one of many events which COMSTECH and IAS are organizing despite constraint in mobility and resources. COMSTECH being founding institution of IAS takes pride on the achievements of this academy and wish this premier organization of top scientists of the Muslim region success in every sphere of activities as per founding vision. Recently, COMSTECH and IAS has agreed to launch major joint research fellowship programs in frontier fields of science and technology, along with a very important program of distinguished COMSTECH IAS scholars, leveraging on the best talent of science and technology available in the OIC region and spreading the benefit of these great people all over the region. We request Excellency to spare time for the launching of these programs in near future, inshallah. I was elected in the fellowship of this prestigious academy some 2 decades ago, and I fully appreciate the potential of this academy. We as fellows and in COMSTECH are confident that under your able patronage, the IAS will become one of the leading scientific professional bodies in years to come. In the August gathering of leading experts in the field of biodiversity, I do not really need to emphasize on the importance of the topic. I would only say that our life and lives of our evolutionary siblings depends on conserving biodiversity. I remember saying of my teacher who used to say that we share this globe with so many other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we must respect their right to live and prosper. Excellency, it is now universally agreed that the complex web of life is so intricately designed by the Creator that every being has a role to play. This interdependency, though poorly understood, is widely appreciated. Loss of life is the loss of diversity. It is threatening our own existence and existence of fellow living beings. Apart from self-centric reason of protecting our existence and well-being, there are numerous other reasons to protect biodiversity, including moral reason of sharing the earth with others, respect of life, appreciating the aesthetic beauty of the amazingly beautiful and diverse world, and understanding that evolution is a continuous process and any disruption can be catastrophic. Unfortunately, biodiversity is dropping everywhere at alarming pace. This is the 6th mass extinction. Impact of biodiversity loss has already crossed nature's limit of resilience. Within the OIC region, Excellency, biodiversity is threatened from fast expanding limits of northern desert in sub-Saharan Africa and tropical Africa, and southern desert as in MENA region. Whereas in the Middle East and other region, there are a number of other challenges. Sea level is impeding in the limits of terrestrial biosphere in island and deltaic countries of the OIC region. Glaciers are melting in Central Asia and in northern Afghanistan and Pakistan, all causing tremendous loss of biodiversity and thus loss of ecosystem services. COVID-19 pandemic is also a stark reminder, as mentioned by Professor Musa, that we need to respect biosphere and create a biophilic world. Human-animal interaction due to deforestation, urbanization, increasing footprint of human activities, exotic eating habits, etc., are the key causes of spread of zoonotic diseases, including recent pandemic, which is certainly not the last one. Therefore, the topic of this conference is most pertinent to us and to our Ummah. I look forward keenly to the presentation of our distinguished speakers who are from prestigious international organization, and being myself responsible as head of COMSTECH, I would like to see the focus of attention of the member countries towards the immense challenges and opportunities presented by contemporary science and technology. I'm very hopeful that today's conference would serve twin purpose. Firstly, I hope that it would refocus the attention of our member countries and their concerned organization towards pressing concerns and the need of action towards preservation of biodiversity, both in the OIC region and universally. On the other hand, I also hope that this gathering of eminent researchers and practitioners will also serve to make the member state aware of the need of what initiatives are underway, and the context provide them as opportunity to connect with various other networks. I would like to congratulate Islamic Academy of Sciences and COMSTECH teams for putting together an impressive list of most distinguished speakers. I admire many of them, and I often listen to their presentation on YouTube. Organizing this event in the most efficient manner was certainly a challenge, which they have achieved with flying color. I and my colleagues at the COMSTECH are looking forward to welcoming you here in Islamabad, along with the Excellency, at the beautiful headquarter building of COMSTECH, with the backdrop of Margla Hill soon, inshallah. Excellency and ladies and gentlemen, I end my welcome remarks with the prayers of your safety, safety of your loved ones, and safety of entire humanity in these turbulent times. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Over to you, Brother Musa.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhry. And now we are privileged to have His Royal Highness to address our gathering today. His Royal Highness Prince El-Hassan bin Talal is a strong and passionate advocate of human rights, solidarity, dignity, and pluralism. He is a driving force behind many initiatives, programs, and institutions at local, regional, and international levels. At the local level and regional level, His Royal Highness established the Higher Council for Science and Technology.
May I stop you there, Dr. Abdullah Musa, in the interest of saving time? Maybe people can read these things, but I am your humble servant, all of you. And we are not important. What is important are the people we are trying to serve. In their millions, the suffering people in different aspects. So I would like to describe the predicament in the words of Professor Evelyn Lindner, who has produced this concept which we are trying to implement next year with a meeting from people from all over the world, the academe, private sector, civil society, and governments. And the title is From Humiliation to Human Dignity. What matters in this whole construct is human dignity. The predicament we have described in many conferences. I would thank you, Professor Chaudhry, for reminding us of the fact that Larry Meadows wrote his report at the end of the 90s. Limits to Growth. And this was succeeded during my tenure with the Club of Rome in a sequel where we refer to the predicament, crises despite and because of what we call progress, despite and because of what we call progress. The list of anthropogenic induced tipping points that are being crossed or growing nearer or on our planet, that are growing nearer on our planet is long. We are also in an era of riots, revolutions, local experiments, and social movements from left to right, but that may look insane, but are very real. May I continue by suggesting that as we see it, humanity is traveling down many dead-end roads simultaneously. Of course, let me remind you that the Chinese government and authorities on the 5th of September 2019 released the following statement: ecological civilization, building a shared future for all life on Earth. And I would like to refer to this ecological civilization by saying that today, Earth Overshoot Day has been earlier and earlier in each year. In 2018, it was on the 1st of August. On 2019, on the 29th of July. It is the day on which humanity's resource consumption for the year exceeds Earth's capacity to regenerate those resources during that year. And I continue to quote and to believe that all of this is part of ecocide, or the killing of our ecosphere. As to sociocide, or the killing of our society, the killing of our sociosphere, inequality is at obscene levels, so much so that the word inequality is a cynical trivialization, as one author describes it. People in countries like Germany, proud of their monetary wealth, are usually unaware that each of them statistically holds what would be the equivalent of 60 slaves in other world regions. A fact that indicates that their influence may be related to enslavement, at least partly, and their pride may be naive and misplaced. The humanistic philosopher Erich Fromm wrote in the 1970s, "A person who has not been completely alienated, who has remained sensitive and able to feel, who has not lost the sense of dignity, who is not yet for sale, who can still suffer over the suffering of others, who has not acquired fully the having mode of existence, briefly a person who has remained a person and not become a thing, cannot help feeling lonely, powerless, isolated in present-day society." So I, with all due respect to the Islamic Academy of Science, ask, is this just the beginning of a long list? These are dangers that all of humanity faces at its present juncture in history. Dangers that may foreclose a dignified future for coming generations, if not the survival of the species Homo sapiens altogether. The rise of disaster capitalism, as Naomi Klein described it in her The Shock Doctrine, spotlights attitudes about care brought to the forefront by the pandemic. And Professor Linda Hartning of the United States chimes in, framing the problem as a war that serves to keep the hierarchy, the dominator system, in place. It diverts attention from finding the most ecological and socially sustainable solutions when, for example, environmental protections are rolled back, watered down, or discarded, rather than sustained and strengthened for the welfare of future generations. After millennia of hierarchical domination, the practice of subjugating people and nature, of course, the Chinese in Kunming want us to adopt the title for the next decade, the title of In Harmony with Nature. The practice of subjugating people and nature transmutes into a collective suicidal strategy. The new zeitgeist asks those who regard themselves as superior dignitaries, as entitled to exclusive privileges, to learn dignified humility and stop exploiting, oppressing, and humiliating allegedly lesser fellow human beings and non-human species. The Humilocene waits to manifest the epoch of humility. So I have spoken of ecocide, and I have spoken of sociocide, and I want to coin, along with my colleagues, the term dignism. Dignity plus ism. Dignism is a concept common to those who believe in the golden rule, the adherence of faith. And I believe that this adherence to faith means altruism and generosity of recognizing the fact that unlike our ancestors, we can see pictures of our blue marble from the perspective of an astronaut. And as for the blue marble, in the context of seeing the totality of the pandemic, it gives me great satisfaction to know that Moroccans and Turks and Pakistanis are in the forefront of creating the antidote to this nightmare that we are all living. And yet when we are looked at in terms of equity vaccine, which is something that we discuss regularly in the context of the World Conference for Refugees and Migrants, of which I am a patron, and looking forward to this dateline. In fact, we have many datelines this year. We have the biodiversity, we have the COP, bringing everything together. We have water meetings. But what I would like to remind you is that unlike our forebears, we have the privilege of experiencing the overview effect with respect to our planet, which helps us to understand that we humans are one species living on one tiny planet, so that we can embrace biophilia. We can feel the ecology of living taking place with one circumscribed biopoetic space that is shared between all beings. We have access to a much more comprehensive knowledge about the universe and our place in it than our grandfathers ever had. In this belief, there are those who believe that Adam Smith's invisible hand will come to rescue us. As a result, and I observe this all around the globe, people are being morally and psychologically crippled to the point that they lack the courage to envision and create systemic frames that would invite pro-social behavior with visible hands, rhizomic social behavior, spreading the roots of networking with each other rather than continuing to speak of the hierarchical nature of the framework, the civilized framework with which we work. And the civilized framework inspired by cogens, the mind, the brain, has to continue if we are to survive. If we have ecocide and sociocide, do we have to wait until we have lived cogitocide? God forbid, the inability to use the wisdom that God gave us. To move to specific examples of what I'm saying, I would like to refer to the Red Sea atmospheric pollution and deep water emissions, with reference to the presence of our Egyptian colleague to whom I spoke a few minutes ago. Deep water in the Red Sea has been deduced as a potent source of atmospheric ethane and propane. I say this to you because all of us east of Suez have always been aware of the importance of the choke points, from Malacca to Hormuz to Bab el-Mandeb, and not so much so as in this last catastrophe, which was averted by the skill of Egyptian engineers supported by the world community in opening or reopening the Suez Canal. But I'm not talking about the movement of goods. I am talking about pollution in a country which is neighboring the most pollutant parts of the world in terms of hydrocarbon production. And in that sense, I would like to suggest that according to a study published in Nature Communications in January of 2020, non-methane hydrocarbons, NMHCs, such as ethane and propane, are known to be significant precursors of tropospheric ozone, and are thus considered to be atmospheric pollutants. Strong underprediction by the global model simulations were found with respect to the Red Sea. I know this how? Because I worked with protecting the Gulf of Aqaba, a regional environmental challenge, way back in 1993, where our Egyptian brothers participated in this particular study through the Arab Office for Youth and Environment. At the time, it was Dr. Imad Adli. Hydrocarbon release from the Red Sea floor, along with the numerous brine pools that are located on the seafloor, have been hypothesized as significant submarine sources of NMHCs. Anthropogenic causes have been ruled out through investigation. The combined ethane, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen, dear brothers and sisters, the combined ethane and propane emission rates in the region rival those from countries such as the United Arab Emirates, a strong supporter of the conference in Kunming, Kuwait, and Oman. I would like to suggest to you with specific examples of the challenges to climate, biodiversity, and oceans, that the three converging challenges, climate, biodiversity, and ocean, it is vitally important to include everyone in broadening our base of understanding. Comprehension leads to understanding, or maybe the other way around. But at this moment, I am not aware that people regard this biodiversity challenge with sufficient knowledge. And when our planet is sick, it is obvious to many of us that we are sick. We cannot pretend to be separate from the biodiverse planet on which we evolved. We are actually in these periods of lockdown moving into a period of what might be described as, Arundhati Roy, among others, has referred to it as a period of anthropause, where everything seems to stop and we are subjective to all the louder voices and compliant with the louder voices as to the methods of cure. It is a process that is continuing, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about a biodiversity decade where we can possibly put in place our thoughts about an anthroportal. It could be described as an anthropause where we all give up or and observe, or it could be described as an anthroportal, a window of opportunity. If there are those among us who are not moved by the disappearance of so much natural diversity on our planet, then surely they should be moved to action by a realization that our very survival is also at stake. As I mentioned, the most worrying outcome of this zoonotic pandemic, COVID-19, has been the closing of borders and the lack of unity in responding. And I would suggest that they are the closing of borders in our ability to think creatively. We witnessed the destruction of 75% of the world's ecosystems. Under the Convention on Biodiversity, participating governments are working toward the protection of 30% of the world's surface, land, and sea being protected by 2030. My daughter, Princess Sumaya, God bless her, carries the flag of the UNESCO Special Envoy and mentioned to us that UNESCO's 252 natural World Heritage Sites, 714 biospheric reserves, and 16 global geoparks covers 6% of the Earth's landmass, which is equivalent to the surface area of China. We need to get involved, I assume, ladies and gentlemen, to bring the protection of biodiversity into the discourse through education across generations, through social activism and NGOs, and through a dialogue with and between, dare I say, policy leaders. I mischievously maybe make a difference between politics and policy. What we need are policies by which political leaders are governed through a decade. In so doing, can we approach our relationship with nature and with our financially poorer fellow citizens in mind? Let me not forget that our fellow citizens who have dealt with nature, indigenous peoples, know more about coping than possibly we do through Olympian interventions. However, Olympian interventions take place, and the Gulf War, if you recall, resulted in the establishment of an environmental compensation program in the countries that were influenced by the war. I was at the time deeply involved with the work and the consequences of the appeal by the Independent Commission for International Humanitarian Issues to take seriously the three forms of disasters, categories of disasters. Firstly, elemental disasters, which you know so much about, Professor Chaudhry: earthquakes, tidal waves, floods, landslides, and of course, volcanic eruptions. Elemental disasters. Secondly, foreseeable disasters. For example, famines and epidemics. Today, we are hoping that our pandemic can revert to becoming an epidemic. I mean, that is a question of the better of two evils. But these epidemics have complex roots in which climatic and human activity interact over extended periods. It is fortunate maybe that we are facing a pandemic in COVID and not in Ebola, because it could have spelt the end of mankind if the behavior that we have seen since COVID over vaccine nationalism and vaccine equity were to prevail. Deliberate disasters, the third category, for example, results of war between states, civil wars, guerrilla warfare, and insurgency activity. And last but not least, accidental disasters, as we saw in the Suez Canal, for example, nuclear and industrial catastrophes. I was in Stockholm during the week of Chernobyl. I remember the sky turned red with the fallout. 70,000 reindeer were killed, put down because of the effect of the nuclear fallout. How long do we have to register these events as milestones and not read in to their consequences? So whether it is the environmental compensation program, whether it is carbon credits, whether it is the National Red Data Book of Mammals, which we produced in Jordan, I would like to bring to your attention that climate, biodiversity, and ocean are three topics, key topics that are deeply interconnected. We can't look at just one angle of the problem and ignore the others. Our ministries don't reflect our ability to think out of silos. It's always, this is my mandate, this is my remit, this is my silo. And the same applies to the 17 SDGs. The 17 SDGs could well be clustered, because surely water, energy, and food or nutrition complement each other, as the American University of Beirut has taught us with their excellent initiative for Levant complementarities. Al-Mashriq, the Levant, and creating connection has been the goal of UNESCO as exemplified by the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. My question to you is, what do you really think of science for peace, science diplomacy, diplomacia al-ulum, in the context of threatened biodiversity? It is this diplomacy of knowledge, of science, that can bring together the most successful collaborative programs between us. Surely science for peace harnesses the almost limitless capacity to create. And therefore, may I thank you all who have been supportive of IPBES. Science allows us to assess the damage done and being done, and IPBES is a summary for policymakers of the Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem. How many of us are aware of these initiatives by UNESCO, which I think could be taken seriously, as indeed I believe that multilateral cooperation focused on human dignity should be. In this context, I would like to refer to the fact that friends in the United Kingdom have recently, with Jordan and other countries, initiated a chair in sustainability, which has the express goal of making our academic and research work more focused on multidisciplinarity. So maybe we'll be long gone when our children and grandchildren are left to find so much that we can still experience in real life, not just in books or videos. And we hear a lot about what children owe to their parents, but this is clearly the reverse of that. But that's what Kunming is largely about. If we have a plan, the question is, why do we need it? To increase sector contribution to the economy in specific countries, or to increase trans-border cooperation and reward in terms of food security for whomsoever is suffering? I don't know whether the Islamic Academy of Science can, within the time left for us between the engagement with the forthcoming meeting in Kunming, to produce the outlines or the framework of a plan, but I hope that we can rhizomically produce the outline or the framework of the cooperation that we so much deserve and that our people so much deserve. May I commend two universities with which I am associated, the Department of Geography of the University of Cambridge and the School of Geography and the Environment, University of Oxford, for a recent publication entitled After the Anthropause, Lockdown Lessons for More Than Human Geographies. And please, if you would, bear in mind that the multiplicity of anthropause events means that they are experienced differently across various socio-cultural, economic, and environmental situations. So there is an analysis of vernacular ecologies, as it has been described by Watmore and Hinchcliffe, of quarantine life, which offers insights into the differential experiences of the anthropause. But don't forget that we can move from the anthropause to the anthroportal, through the pandemic portal. Unpause the anthropause. Attention to the multiplicity of anthroposes sheds new light on Arundhati Roy's claim in 2020 that the pandemic is a portal. I have not taken the opportunity to welcome the participants in this webinar, but I hope that those of you who have taken the time and effort to do so will be kind enough to give us the feedback on your thoughts in terms of this all-important effort to promote the noble art of conversation, which by all means is not a martial art. Thank you for your patience, Chair, Dr. Abdullah Musa, and all your colleagues. And I am at your disposal if you wish to ask me any questions or give me any advice. As I said, I'm at your service so long as you are all in the service of the public good. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Sidi, for this many enlightening ideas and thoughts. If there is any question the audience would like really to address Sidi Hassan.
دكتور عبد الله الصوت مش واضح صوتك
I said if there is any comments or
دكتور عبد الله نعم
or questions from you to Sidi Hassan.
دكتور عبد الله اسمح لي
تفضل.
يعني شكرا جزيلا سمو الأمير الحسن تتحفنا دائما بالعلم والمعلومات والمصطلحات والمفاهيم. أنا عجبني مصطلح
عليك
سيدي
ممكن أتمنى عليك استخدام اللغة الإنجليزية لمتابعة ضيوفنا.
I'm sorry. Thank you indeed, our inspiring scholar, let alone being a prince. And what I would like to highlight and to be fond of is the concept of ecocide. We talk about pesticide, genocide, and for me as a linguist, ecocide is an excellent concept with cognitive, emotional, physical aspect. And I think we need to have this deeply rooted in curriculum and really to be used. Indeed, we are killers of our ecology and our environment. And I would like to thank you for providing me with this excellent concept to be standardized and to be adopted in our curriculum. Thank you very much indeed, My Royal Highness.
Thank you.
Dr. Abdullah, may I comment on some of the points raised by His Excellency Prince Hassan bin Talal?
Please.
Yeah. In fact, His Excellency has raised some very intriguing issues, you see. And I, being the chair of Pakistan Science Foundation for 3 years, you see, I have learned a lot because I was also chairing a committee on mega projects executed by UNESCO. That was Man and Biosphere, about which you have talked about briefly, you see. We are in fact ignoring to establish biosphere reserve in different countries, particularly in the OIC countries, you see. In Pakistan, we have hardly 2 in number. In Jordan, I think is only 1, you see, Dana in the central part and southern part. But in the adjoining country, particularly in Iran, because I visited as a chair of that particular program, there are 13 biosphere reserves. And they counteract the adversities which is being created by the environment and as well as particularly the climate change impact. We have to ponder that how far we have progressed on taking action, you see. We have a knowledge, we have generated knowledge through our research on biodiversity particularly, and there are some pertinent policies related to biodiversity conservation. But what is lacking? This is the main enigma, I think, in all the countries, in all the societies, that we chalk out many policies, very viable policies, but implementation is negligible. We have to involve the politician, we have to involve the government, and we have to take the actions rather than just documentation, PPT's presentation, presentation. And we have to focus on political actions, government action. You have rightly pointed on that biosphere can be split into ecosphere, sociosphere, and many other components, you see. The main problem which we are facing today is the environment. You see, we used to be taught by our very eminent teachers that a phenotype depends on the interaction of a genotype and environment. Now we are changing the variability. We are changing the diversity of animals and plants, you see, in a holistic manner, in every lab, in every, scientific entity. A lot of work is being conducted on changing. But with the environment, you see, because environment is a significant component in biodiversity and all the society as a whole, you see. One more point, and then I would end up with giving time, to the other participant. You have rightly pointed out that we have to get integration of climate, biodiversity, and the oceans. As far as my knowledge as a biologist, you see, because oceans comprise 2/3 of the biodiversity, 2/3 of the life. We have only 1/3 life on Earth, and we are not capitalizing, in a befitting manner, particularly the life which is present in the form of animals, plants, or microbes, you see, in the ocean. This is a gigantic resource. We have to explore it, and we have to control the impact of pollution, particularly which you've been talking about. So there are some parts maybe we can discuss, because I have been involved in Man and Biosphere program, which is being executed in fact right from 1971, and about 129 countries, they have adopted the Man and Biosphere program. And there are about 700 biosphere reserves throughout the world. And we have to focus that. If we have to conserve the biodiversity, we have to utilize it, and we have to adhere to the sustainable development goals, you see, particularly. Thank you very much.
Dr. Abdullah, may I comment?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sidi Prince El-Hassan. It's very inspiring as usual. And for us scientists, in fact, it's challenging for me, because you know more than us, in every field, in fact. My comment is, I looked at the agenda program of the conference and, the title Biodiversity. And I was really surprised not to see the discussion of diversity of microorganisms. The new classification of life, the tree of life now, it classifies the living organisms into 3 domains. It is the eukarya, which is the plants, animals, humans, and all the multicellular organisms. Bacteria is in a different domain, and archaea, which is an ancient bacteria, is another domain, which means 2/3 of the living organisms in the universe are microorganisms, especially bacteria. And we are seeing what microbes are doing to us and how they are changing our life. So I would really like to see, maybe in the future conferences of the IAS in biodiversity, even though we don't see it in our naked eye, but it is very strong, powerful, these are powerful organisms, which are microorganisms or bacteria. And they play a lot of role in the SDGs, in the even energy, in the food, human food security. all of that aspects. You know, this is my area, so it's my game. So I would really like to see some light shed on this area. Thank you, CD. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr.
May I comment on the last two speakers' interventions? Our first distinguished speaker spoke to the question of life, whether human or plant life. And I would like to say that an ethical point of departure is demanded not only a realistic recognition of the complementarities of in harmony with nature. And in that regard, as it is the Islamic Academy of Science, I would like to say that all the religious traditions have taken into consideration expressing their concerns for this natural balance. But as far as the specialized discussions in specialized centers in different regions, I would like to express my deep thanks. I would like to express my deep appreciation to the contributors in science diplomacy and the Red Sea's unique coral reef, the title of a study produced by Policy and Practice Reviews, and on this occasion, Frontiers in Marine Science. I noticed that the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences participates from the United States, the College of Global Public Health, the Marine Science Station of Jordan in Aqaba, the Max Planck Institute of Colloids and Interface in Potsdam, Germany, the Department of Biological Sciences, and of course, let's not forget the participation of the Department of Biology at the University of Constance, as well as the Israel National and Parks Authority, the MENA and Faculty of Life Sciences at Bar Ilan and others. So that's what I was referring to earlier, that I know for many of us this means politics, not policy. But on the other hand, I think that it's about time that we realize that full regional scientific and cooperation will require directives from the high levels of government in those specific areas. And I want to point out that you referred to Jordan. A few centers devoted to transnational scientific research exist in the region, with one prominent example being the synchrotron light for experimental science and applications in the Middle East, SESAME, an international center for scientific research centered around the region's first particle accelerator. Members include Egypt, Iran, Israel, and Jordan. So we are crossing, transboundary thinking is evolving, and 14 marine scientists who worked in the region from Switzerland to Israel contribute their perspectives on regional transnational scientific research, reef monitoring, as well as, of course, Switzerland being a neutral country had offered skill in diplomacy and science, and the hosting of the transnational Red Sea Center. So I would like to ask you all if this is achieving or purporting to achieve this cooperation, the following results: the high potential value of the development of antibiotics, probiotics, or other classes of therapeutics from biology active minerals found in the fauna and flora of coral reefs, or the myriad species of bacteria that live in reef ecosystems. How can we speak strictly of the three domains as though they are going to be cherry-picked as priorities for further research? As far as the UNESCO, they recognize the Red Sea's entire coral reef as a marine World Heritage Site, as was proposed by Saudi delegates to the September UNESCO 4th World Heritage Marine System. May I just suggest to all of you that successful regional cooperation would require depoliticizing the Red Sea, in as much as focusing on these transcendent, transboundary themes is an area of interest for us all. I would stop my remark there and would be happy to discuss in detail with those who are more qualified than myself a concept of how to advance this process.
Any other comment from the audience?
May I have a question?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Excellency, I'll put my question first and then I'll explain what I mean to ask.
Please do.
Is it, do you think it is possible to have a sustainable future and the kind of biodiversity that we are talking about within the, without in fact addressing our lifestyles and the consumerist society and the excessive consumerism, unnecessary consumerism, which obviously is placing a huge burden on our resources of the world as a center of the resources that we use for technology and our needs. So my question really is this, that it's not really a question only of science and technology as to how we address the issues of conservation and sustainability. It's primarily an issue of how we choose to live. If we choose to live in the extensive consumerism that we are, and unnecessary in many cases, then probably we are not going to be able to sustain a future. Thank you.
I would like to say immediately the choice is very clear. Either we continue to increase our dependency on the outside world in terms of the consumerism to which you are rightly referring, and which does not begin to scratch the surface of the needs of the poorer people in our community and communities, or making a clear regional statement. And I think it has to be a regional statement because no single country in our South Asian or West Asian region can do any better at the moment than looking at the ASEAN example. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations have developed a pattern of intra-independence to recognize the identity of the other so as to keep face or save face, if you will, larger or smaller, richer or poorer, different regimes, forms of government, such as from Vietnam to Brunei Dar es Salaam, or from Malaysia to Myanmar, or whatever. I'm not being judgmental. All I'm saying is that everything they produce is produced in conjunction with and in full sharing with their neighbors. Their level of import is strikingly low. We compare the West Asia region, everything that we do is to import from outside while celebrating our Independence Day every year. The only independence that I can imagine is for each region to deliberately begin consultations leading to the creation of a regional ECOSOC, an economic and social council where we address New York before New York tells us what it is that the ECOSOC in New York have decided as priorities. UN-ESQA, as you know, is a very credible organization, but it is still UN-ESQA in terms of initiatives from New York and Geneva towards our region. Why is it that we cannot, as a region, make our thoughts clearer on specific issues such as the future of our ecology and our sociology? We are recognized as the region by the term Middle East. The Americans refer to Middle East in terms of everything from the Moroccan coast to Bangladesh. And this cannot continue. I mean, the ellipse of crisis starts from the Moroccan coast and ends in Bangladesh, sweeping through certain Central African realities and then up inclusive of the peninsula. And it seems to accommodate the choke points which remain choke points, i.e. Hormuz, Mandeb. Suez, of course, is a throughput. But I think the time has come to look at this region in terms of addressing the world from the regionals. The variables tracked in the regional monitoring concepts can only be measured after standardization of methods. And if we are only to standardize with the optimal beneficiary, the industry abroad, at the expense of our own fledgling hopes of self-dependence or promoting our own stability, I think that this would be a major setback. And this is why I think, going back to early beginnings, when we started with Professor Abdus-Salam on the Third World Academy of Science in Trieste, and when we started with the concept of the academy, Islamic Academy, the hope had been, and still is, I believe, that we can begin to focus on advancing scientific studies. I mean, if we are proposing a scientific study of the Red Sea ecosystem and suggesting that by virtue of the fact that we live in the region, we have a right to call the shots, does this mean that that consumer represented by an international consortium can override us? It's as simple as that. So I would like to suggest that this partnership with local self-dependence, regional complementarities, networking, centers for Middle East desalination and research, for example. Again, we were told for so long that the membrane issue of the desalination was something that could only be achieved by the foreign companies. Why can't this issue be addressed by the regional initiatives? And in that sense, I would like to once again refer to the Swiss expertise and to say that a neutral country, one of the few neutral countries, is taking an initiative which maybe we could all learn from, and that is the initiative of non-intervention. We have to wage peace, because it is peace that can create the stability for all of this. But waging commercial interest in the context of the East India Company of a couple of centuries ago and creating fiefdoms of influence is not promoting the initiatives taken in the region. So I salute Oman, just as an example, that the Research Center for Middle East Desalination trains and promotes regional cooperation in this area. Anything that does promote regional cooperation, I think, should be recognized for what it is, because apart from anything else, it is drawing back, luring back our talent that represents the Arab and Muslim diaspora all over the world.
Dr. Adnan Badran, please. Your Excellency, you want to make a comment?
Yes, I would like to refer to one part of what His Royal Highness has indicated in his opening address about the Red Sea. Really, the Red Sea is semi-closed sea. It has been defended from the hazards of the environment for so long. It is unique. It is unique in its fauna and flora, including the microorganisms Professor Hanan was talking about. We shouldn't forget that. We'll make her happy. So I think now the Red Sea is exposed to dangers by a human being. Huge transport is undergoing in the Red Sea. I am worrying, like everyone else, that the uniqueness of the Red Sea in terms of its marine environment, in terms of its fauna and flora, which has been developed through millions of years of evolution, will be disturbed. Again, we are talking about biodiversity. The biodiversity of the Red Sea is huge and tremendous in terms of marine biodiversity. We may lose it. Red Sea now is considered one of the purest seas in the world because it has no rivers with sedimentation pouring to it, no industry around it. Only I am worrying about this transport is being developed now. Immense transport between east and west through the Suez Canal. And probably there will be expansion of other means of transport between east and west using the Red Sea. I think if we don't safeguard it through international, what I call international accord, like having it like we did at UNESCO for Isle Lake, which is the deepest freshwater lake in the world. It is in Siberia, in Russia. If we don't really do something like having the Red Sea as a heritage, where will be safeguarded internationally against pollution, against misuse, and against really destroying the habitat and the biodiversity of the Red Sea. Again, Prince Hassan talked about ethane and propane, and this is being really discovered by scientists. There is a lot of gases which may affect the ozone layer and really affect, again, the climate change. So again, there is, this is an area of producing fossil fuel, one of the biggest area in the world in producing fossil fuel. Again, we have to safeguard it against what I call pollution from carbons and other derivatives. So I want to take this one out of this conference. Probably if there will be a declaration as a result of this conference to take care of mentioning what Sidi Hassan has mentioned about the Red Sea. I think IAS could cooperate and could help through UNESCO and through Alexo and through ISISCO, can help in bringing all research centers and universities overlooking, and they are Islamic universities. They are overlooking the Red Sea into a cooperation and science cooperation for the environmental protection of this sea, which is really semi-closed, and any pollution takes place there, it will be disastrous. It will be disastrous. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. I agree with you that I would agree with you that though the biodiversity summits scheduled for September after the meeting in June, which I believe you're also targeting, correct me on this, should not be regarded as the first opportunity to signal our support for a new relationship with our natural world. I think that maybe our support should be signaled at more than one speed. There are those of you who are passionate and knowledgeable about this issue, and yet others who are lagging behind. So maybe one spur to us, Dr. Hilat, for example, to remind ourselves of the medical challenge is to recognize how many diseases have emerged over the years, such as Zika, AIDS, SARS, and Ebola. They're quite different at first glance, but they all originated from animal populations under conditions of severe environmental pressures. That says it all. If you need synergy, you only have to bear that in mind, that this in harmony with nature also includes health for all by all principles. And I hope that these concepts of an ecological public health approach could be concepts that could be solidly adopted according to solid research and solid proposals. That is maybe the first tranche of an effective contribution by the Islamic Academy of Science and those with whom you network. But if the Arab strategy on health and environment, for example, takes in one breath water, sanitation and health, and then air pollution, and then food safety, and fourthly, chemical safety, waste management, and environmental health services, and there are, and of course, climate change and health, sustainable development and health. All of these are platforms for contributions that, without the necessary integration, are going to fall short of the challenge of turning the anthropause into a portal that we can all pass through and begin to work on the next phase. So acting in a multi-sectoral, overarching manner on all social and environmental determinants of health. This is questioned by the WHO, the social determinants of, in this case, the social determinants of COVID. Why don't we talk about the social determinants of health, which incorporate all these aspects, employing health in all policies, an approach to health as well as health for all by all principles. Thank you very much.
Lastly, we have Dr. Highness want to make a comment. Dr. Hani?
Yeah, thank you so much, Your Highness. As usual, your wisdom is guiding us. I just want to highlight our vision in IUCN, the region and the global. Still, the biodiversity loss is a crucial issue. Even the CBD convention didn't achieve the targets and the goal which has been planned for 10 years. So still the world and the region, especially West Asia region, is losing a lot of species and habitats which will affect our life as a human being. So my concern and my clear point that we should focus on biodiversity loss. Biodiversity loss should be stopped. We should have a target by 2030 that what we are losing should be stopped in a way or another. This will require our countries in the region to have a clear strategies on this, and also the policies, as you have mentioned, linked to the climate change and the threats we are facing should be this time be effectively managed. Otherwise, the biodiversity will still continue lost, and also our life will be highly affected. Thank you so much.
دكتور عبد الله.
دكتور نبيل تفضل.
نعم.
تفضل.
شكرا. Sidi Hassan, dear colleagues, among the many excellent concepts and ideas that I gathered from his speech and presentation, I got one important point. If biodiversity is sick, we are sick. This is a big idea. That means we have to rethink of health, rethinking health, a new vision of health. I just want to say there is interconnection between human-animal ecosystem interface, where we know 70% of human infectious diseases are coming from animals. To get into this, at Yarmouk University, in a professional and sustainable manner, we just initiated 2 weeks ago a master program in what we called global health, or And this, we hope to be a regional program, rather only a program only for Yarmouk, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
CD, would like to continue or take more?
Well, it's entirely up to you. It's entirely up to you. I noticed that you have an agenda of your own, and I don't want to intrude more than you have given me a very generous chance to participate. I just want to recognize, although we have not heard from the ladies in this part, in this exercise. For example, I would have liked to have met Bushra Mirza, the Vice Chancellor of Lahore College for Women, who was participating and possibly to tell us about the establishment of the research laboratory to produce transgenic plants. And I also had been hoping that in terms of our ongoing conversation, to invite the president of the World Agricultural Heritage Foundation, Parvez Kohaf Khan, who I thought was listed as a speaker. I don't know if these people have apologized, but maybe the opportunity will present itself in the future. I'm fascinated to know that Sayyid Muhammad Nasser goes back to the Cartagena Protocol in Colombia, so he's been a long time visitor of these issues. And once again, may I recognize Mary Jane Ramos de la Cruz, Technical Officer of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. I hope that Dr. Abu Leila and others will contact ITPGRFA, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. But I come back to Hani Shar and say, we have the greatest admiration for IUCN, where you started your journey, and in particular, IUCN's recognition of the word HEMA, which of course is an original regional word and concept. And your work with IUCN, the ROA team, the West Asia team, with more than 20 years experience, I think has much to offer us. So I look forward to, and I would invite the Jordanian participants to look to cooperation with you and with others whom you could recommend in these fields. As for our Turkish participants, I just want to say that TÜBİTAK has always been an icon of cooperation ever since the mid-50s, although I was a young boy. But the idea of TÜBİTAK is the practical application of so many breakthrough ideas. And I just hope that you can gradually work to developing your regional position as a center for ideas. There are many countries who work by, and you know what I mean by virtue of their enormous wealth or by virtue of their connection with their diaspora, who try to develop a niche for themselves. And I just wonder why Turkey cannot develop a niche for itself in terms of responding to the question that I was once asked by former President Ozal, whom I knew when he was Under Secretary at the Ministry of Planning, I believe. And then, of course, Prime Minister and a very distinguished leader of your beloved country. He said, we would like to share our water resources. Of course, this region imports every single drop of water from beyond the region. But we would like to share on the basis of a clear stratigraphy, a clear national information system. And I believe that you're talking about information systems here. And on that basis, to implement a regional mapping of the potential for the rational exploitation of resources, whether industrial, drinking water, agriculture, and so forth. And of course, I remember once again that hydropolitics center in Istanbul holding an excellent meeting on the water pipeline from Turkey through Syria to Jordan at a given moment after a visit I made to Turkey some years ago. And one of the participants was saying, well, this might mean dependence on a single source of supply. And the professor very elegantly said, it doesn't mean that at all. It means the beginning of regional cooperation. So I have always been a multilateralist. I am accused of being a maverick because I oppose bilateralism, which to me means other things as well, going back to the earlier question about dependence. But I think that the time to recognize that pipelines per se, whether they're water, gas, oil, have to have a social impact in changing the face of the region. So I hope that this profile of Turkey as a catalyzer of ideas can be developed, and be assured that there are many of us who would like to participate with you in this altruistic endeavor.